Okay, so you want to own an Airbnb business. Buy a place, put some nice furniture in it, take some photos, and watch the bookings roll in while guests pay you to sleep in a room you already own. No guests to manage long-term, no messy tenants. Just weekend money stacking up in your account. It sounds like the easiest real estate hack ever discovered. And the scale backs up the appeal. The global vacation rental market is worth somewhere around $109 billion in 2026, and Airbnb alone processed $91.3 billion in gross bookings in 2025, up 12% from the year before. That is not a side hustle industry anymore. It's a genuine global asset class. But here's the twist almost nobody knows about the company that built this entire industry. In 2007, its founders couldn't make rent in their own San Francisco apartment. To survive, they designed limited edition cereal boxes, Obama O's and Captain McCain's, timed to the 2008 election, and sold them for $40 a box to raise enough cash to keep the company alive. That's not a metaphor. The company that would eventually be worth over $80 billion once funded its own survival with novelty breakfast cereal. That gap between a company now worth tens of billions and a founding story built on selling cereal to strangers to cover rent is exactly the gap this video is going to walk you through. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly why a property that looks fully booked on your calendar can still be losing you money every single month. How a single number, tracked by almost no first-time host, decides whether your Airbnb is a real business or an expensive hobby with good photos, and why one of Airbnb's most well-funded competitors, backed by a 20-year deal with one of the largest hotel companies on Earth, filed for full bankruptcy liquidation in November of 2025 in a matter of days. Before you buy a single property, you need to understand what an Airbnb business actually is at its core. It is not fundamentally a real estate business. That sounds strange, since the entire asset is a physical property, so stay with it. What you're actually selling is not the room. It's the guarantee that a total stranger in an unfamiliar city can walk into your space and have it feel exactly the way the photos promised every single time, regardless of who stayed there the night before. The service is consistency delivered to someone who has never met you and has no reason to trust you beyond a 5-star average and some professional photography. The property is just the container that consistency lives inside. Every cleaning cycle, every restocked amenity, every maintenance call either protects that trust or quietly damages it, one bad review at a time. Let's talk about what it costs just to exist. Furnishing a single property to a standard guest actually expect decent furniture, linens, kitchenware, a few thoughtful touches, typically runs somewhere between $10,000 and $30,000 for a standard 1 to 2 bedroom unit. That sounds manageable, and on its own it is, but that's before you're allowed to legally operate. Most major cities now require a short-term rental license or permit, and the fee itself is often the smallest part of the cost. San Francisco charges $450 a year for its short-term residential rental certificate, but requires the host to live there at least 275 days a year. Vancouver charges a $108 annual license fee plus a $77 application cost, and restricts short-term rentals to your actual primary residence only. New York City's registration fee is a modest $145 a year, but the practical requirement that the host must be physically present for every single guest stay and can only host 2 guests at a time has effectively made whole home short-term rentals illegal there entirely. Then comes short-term rental insurance, which is not the same policy as a standard homeowner's policy and is treated as a completely separate, non-negotiable expense once you start hosting strangers regularly, typically running around $7 or more per book night on top of whatever base coverage you already carry. Add professional photography, a smart lock system, and basic starter supplies, and a single legally operating Airbnb unit easily represents somewhere between $15,000 and $40,000 in setup costs before your first guest has even checked in, on top of the underlying cost of the property itself. That is the cost to exist in this business. And that number is separate from, and in addition to, whatever you paid for the real estate. Now let's talk about the cost to actually operate, And this is where almost every first-time host underestimates the business badly. The single most misunderstood recurring cost in this industry is not the mortgage, it's turnover. Unlike a long-term rental, where you might deep clean once a year between tenants, an Airbnb requires a full professional-grade cleaning after every single guest checkout, regardless of whether that guest stayed one night or 10. A standard turnover clean for a typical property runs somewhere between $100 and $150, and that's before laundering linens, restocking consumables like coffee and toiletries, and the coordination time of managing a cleaner's schedule around guest arrivals and departures. A property running 15 turnovers a month at $125 each is looking at close to $1,875 a month in cleaning costs alone, every single month indefinitely. Add Airbnb's own host service fee, typically 14 to 16% of the booking subtotal, plus routine maintenance, utilities that you now pay directly instead of passing to a long-term tenant, and, if you're not managing it yourself, a property management fee that can run anywhere from 15% for basic digital-only service up to 40% for full-service management that handles cleaning and maintenance directly. Stack those costs together, and it becomes clear very quickly that the mortgage was never the hard part of this business. Here is the mechanism that quietly destroys more Airbnb hosts than any other single number, and it doesn't have a dramatic industry name. It's simply called occupancy, and it works exactly like a taxi that only gets paid for the days it actually has a fare, while still paying for gas, insurance, and the lease every single day, whether it drives or not. Globally, the average Airbnb host operates at roughly 33.7% occupancy, meaning the property earns revenue on barely 1 out of every 3 nights of the year, while every fixed cost, the mortgage or rent, the insurance, the license renewal, the utility bills, keeps running for all 365. If your break-even occupancy, the point where nightly revenue actually covers your fixed costs, sits above that 33.7% global average, you are not running a profitable short-term rental. You are subsidizing an empty room with your own capital for 2/3 of the calendar year. The revenue model, on paper, is beautifully clean. Take the average nightly rate, currently around $173 to $216 depending on the market, multiply it by the number of nights actually booked, and you have your revenue. A property renting for $175 a night, booked 200 nights a year, brings in $35,000 in gross revenue. On a spreadsheet, that's an extremely attractive number for a single unit. But that clean formula assumes every night at that rate is actually booked, and that assumption is exactly where Airbnb economics fall apart in practice. The real number that separates a healthy operation from a failing one isn't the nightly rate. It's occupancy relative to your specific fixed cost base. 2 identical properties, same square footage, same furniture, same neighborhood, same mortgage payment, can produce wildly different outcomes purely based on this one number. A property running at 65% occupancy in a strong tourist market is essentially printing money once fixed costs are covered, because every additional booked night beyond break-even flows almost entirely to profit. A property sitting at the global average of 33.7% occupancy in a market with weak demand or heavy competition can look identical on Instagram and still lose money every single month because turnover costs and platform fees eat a huge share of the small number of nights that do get booked while the mortgage keeps running regardless. Same property, same furniture, same nightly rate. One host is comfortably profitable. The other is quietly funding a hobby. Let's look at what this actually did to real operators. In September 2023, New York City began strictly enforcing Local Law 18, requiring hosts to be physically present for every guest stay and limiting them to 2 guests at a time. The effect was immediate and brutal. Active short-term rental listings in NYC collapsed by roughly 70% from more than 22, zeros in active listings down to fewer than 3,000. Essentially eliminating whole home short-term rentals in one of the largest tourism markets on Earth overnight. This wasn't a case of bad hosts or bad properties. It was a regulatory decision made in a city council chamber, and it erased entire portfolios of income regardless of how well those properties had been run, Then there's the cautionary tale of scaling the wrong way entirely. Sonder Holdings was once considered Airbnb's most credible rival, managing over 9,900 furnished apartments and hotel rooms across 41 cities by the end of 2024, and it did so by signing long-term master lease agreements on thousands of units rather than owning the underlying real estate. In August 2024, Sonder signed what looked like a lifeline, a 20-year licensing agreement with Marriott International to distribute its inventory through Marriott's booking platform. But integration between the two companies' systems ran into severe technical problems, and Marriott terminated the deal in November 2025, citing default. Within days, Sonder announced it was winding down operations immediately, telling guests mid-stay to vacate their rooms, and filed for Chapter 7 liquidation. The company had posted a net loss of $224 million on $621 million of revenue in 2024 alone, weighed down by $303 million in annual lease payments on properties it didn't own. Strong occupancy at over 80% and a rising average daily rate weren't enough to save a business structurally overextended on long-term liabilities it couldn't unwind quickly when a single partnership collapsed. Let's put honest numbers on what this business looks like at the scale of a single host. Scenario 1, everything goes right. A well-located one-bedroom unit purchased and furnished for roughly $30,000 in setup costs on top of the property itself, running at 65% occupancy at a $180 average nightly rate. Annual revenue, approximately $42,700. Annual operating costs, cleaning and turnover, Airbnb host fees, insurance, utilities, maintenance, and license renewal, approximately $22,000. Net operating profit, approximately $20,700 a year, on top of whatever equity the underlying property is building. This is a genuinely healthy, well-run, single-unit Airbnb business. Scenario 2, the realistic version. Same property, same furniture, same starting setup. This time, a new short-term rental ordinance in your city caps unhosted rentals at 90 nights a year, cutting your available booking nights by more than half. Occupancy on those remaining nights falls to 40% as increased local competition floods the market with new listings. Your cleaning costs stay fixed per turnover, regardless of the shorter season, and your city raises the annual license renewal fee to help fund enforcement. Annual revenue, approximately $13,300 on the sharply reduced number of legally available nights. Annual operating costs with cleaning, fees, insurance, and the new compliance costs, approximately $15,500. Net operating loss, approximately $2,200 a year on the exact same property, the exact same furniture, and the exact same neighborhood. The difference between the good year and the bad year is nearly $23,000, and nothing about the physical asset changed at all. Only the regulatory ground underneath it did. In late 2007, Brian Chesky and Joe Gebbia were two design school graduates who couldn't afford their San Francisco rent. When a design conference sold out every hotel room in the city, they bought 3 air mattresses, laid them out on their apartment floor, and rented them to conference attendees for $80 a night, calling it Air Bed and Breakfast. The idea nearly died before it began. Investors passed on it repeatedly, several telling the founders directly that nobody would ever stay in a stranger's home. To survive one particularly broke stretch in 2008, they designed and sold limited edition election-themed cereal boxes, Obama O's and Cap'n McCain's, at $40 a box, raising roughly $30,000 just to keep the lights on. That scrappy, almost embarrassing origin turned out to be the entire thesis of the company. Strangers really would trust each other if the platform built the right guarantees around that trust. Airbnb went public in December 2020 at a valuation north of $100 billion. The company that nearly starved trying to prove a stranger could sleep on your air mattress eventually became the company that redefined how the world thinks about a spare room. Step back for a second. The property is just the property. Anyone can buy square footage, put a bed in it, and take a nice photo. None of that is the business. The business is the discipline behind the number nobody checks before they buy, how many nights a year that room will actually be booked, and whether your fixed costs can survive the 2/3 of the calendar when it sits empty. Right now, somewhere, there is a beautifully furnished Airbnb listing with 5-star reviews and a fully booked looking calendar for next month. Sitting quietly upside down on a spreadsheet nobody in the household has opened since tax season.